Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. This is Mike Yost, President of MESA International, and I want to welcome you to our webinar here today. This is a webinar for the celebration of the 2017 Smart Story Awards. This is a program that we started last year, so this is our second annual contest. And we had a total of 30 entrants, 12 media sponsors, and a ton of great tips and examples on how to prove value in using smart manufacturing solutions. The stories are available still for download at www.smartstoryawards.com. And I would like to say that the focus on this from a MESA perspective is to celebrate the people and solutions that are driving manufacturing. And as the technologies continue to evolve and strengthen and get more and more powerful and capable, I think that this process here of sharing our understanding of value and pain points and all the experiences that everybody has is really as important as anything else we face in industry. So truly appreciate how everybody has come together to put their stories forward, to share their stories. And again, we're here, excuse me, to celebrate the fact that you as the community have chosen the 3 winners that are going to be represented here today. So we could change the slide quickly. Just want to step us through how you can participate here today using the control panel. So on the webinar control panel, you'll see an orange arrow that you can use to open and close your panel. You'll also see a questions box that is listed there. So please feel free throughout the course of the session today to put your questions into that box, and our presenters and our moderators will respond to the questions that you submit. And this presentation is being recorded, and it will be posted along with the slides into the MESA Resource Library within 1 week, available to all of our premium members. So next slide, please. So for anyone unfamiliar with how the program works, we had 30 entrants submit smart stories this year, and then based on the number of downloads from the community, we have our 3 winners here today. So you'll see Piero Orlando from Siemens. He's the Digital Enterprise Thought Leader for Aerospace and Defense. His submission received the most downloads, followed by Mike James, who's the Chairman of the Board at ATS, and Scott Daugherty, who's the Senior Vice President of Business Development at Cormetech. So over the next hour, Mr. John Clemens, who is the brains behind this program to begin with and oversees its execution, he will be engaging with our presenters and having everybody tell their story and drive us through a Q&A session. So I would again encourage everybody to submit questions into the question box, and I will turn it over to John and ask John to come in and introduce our panelists. John?
Excellent. Thank you, Mike. So our first story here is from Piero Orlando, and he's with Siemens. He's the Digital Enterprise Thought Leader for Aerospace and Defense. And the story that he's going to be telling us about today is about a manufacturing company that produces aerospace engines. They were using an ERP-based MES system and decided to migrate to a PLM-centric MES. And the thing that I find most interesting about this story is having to deal with 17 geographically dispersed plants as part of the total solution. So, Piero, I'd like to turn it over to you, and we'd like to hear your story.
Oh, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, John. Thank you, Mike. Yes, the story is actually pretty simple. The company we were faced was actually a company that started in defining the complete engineering of the engine directly into the ERP. because it was simple, because the ERP was already there, because actually the ERP was SAP. The SAP was already there. They already had people skilled in SAP, and then decide to actually define the complete bill of process, basically the list of operations that has to be executed directly into ERP, and then to send the information from ERP to MES in order to make this operation executed at the shop floor. And then they face the problem in having some part of the engineering which cannot be defined in the ERP. And then they had a different system, and basically merge information from SAP and to this external system in order to have something consistent into the MES. Finally, they decide to introduce the PLM and to move a complete set of engineering information from SAP to the PLM in order to have a consistent system which is able to basically store all information which has been which will be authored in the PLM and then finally sent to the MES. In order to measure how good is the solution, basically they identify some KPIs, which is something very new, which is the new product introduction and new product development, which is actually measuring how good is the engineering. So which is how we can be fast in translating the information from the engineering to something which is actually executable at the shop floor. The second KPI was the right first time. So how good are the information at the shop floor so that the operator is able to execute the operation without adding errors, without asking information to the engineering, and without generating error and generating reward. And the other KPI important is actually the number of escalation which is sent to engineering, which is basically measuring from a certain number of defects they found at the shop floor, which are the number of defects which is due to the fact that the engineering information are not available. Maybe not because the engineering is wrong, but because the information is not available in paper, for example. So these three KPIs was actually the measuring of how the solution is good.
All right. Thank you, Piero. We appreciate that. So then going on to our next presenter, we have Mike James. He is the chairman of the board for ATS, and this is a story about the MES system, manufacturing execution system, that ATS helped develop for Carlsberg Brewery. And the thing that to me is impressive about this story is that for anybody that's familiar with brewery operations knows that is kind of what I call deceptively simple. It looks simple, but in reality it's far more complicated than it looks. And so making that especially challenging. So I'd like to turn it over to Mike, and let's hear your story, Mike.
This project started really from a best practice and continuous improvement project that Carlsberg already had running, and they invited us to join as a consultant to bring the different breweries together. It was basically all of the breweries in Europe, so we were talking about a total at the time of 17 breweries. The team understood after a while that it was very hard for them to measure the performance. They didn't have a consistent way of measuring the performance in the different breweries. They were therefore struggling with, who had the best practices, which of the best practices should be adopted across all the breweries. And as this idea developed and went further, the project became larger, and all the elements of the process. And as you mentioned, John, it can get very complicated when we're taking the orders into the ERP. We're trying to manage the detailed scheduling. We've got the physical controls layer, which was different in every brewery. So how do we move forward with this? And slowly but surely this project turned into a manufacturing execution systems project, which would really embed the MES into the position that it would connect all of these different solutions together. The result was that we were able to build on the best practices, but also move into an area of great importance, which was the scheduling and the response to the demand cycle that was going on in the market. Anybody who's familiar with this market, it's very variable. It can change very quickly. If the sun is shining, if it's warm, more beer gets drunk. If a football match is won in a particular city, more beer gets drunk there, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's hard for these companies to keep up with the changing demand that's taking place all the time. So eventually, moving from best practices into a demand-based system, which really allowed the business to improve its response to changes in demand. And I'll leave the rest of the story, I think, to a little bit more detail as we go into the next section. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mike. So let's advance a couple of slides and let's get to our third presenter. And this is going to be